So Robert Allen, who's one of the co-defendants and the main witness in the trial of the murder of rapper XXXTentacion, was sentenced last week. And if you had been following this case, you know that Robert Allen had already pled guilty to second-degree murder and armed robbery last year. And it was his co-defendants, Michael Boatright, Dedrick Williams, and Trayvon Newsome, who were actually going to go to trial. And just a little background on plea negotiations in cases like this. Typically, when you are charged with a crime, the district attorney is going to make an offer that is going to be much more favorable than if you were to go to trial, get found guilty, and get sentenced then. So that's where the incentive is to take a plea deal. But when you have major cases, especially in one like this, where you have a serious armed robbery and a murder, a lot of times the district attorney is not going to initially come to the table with an offer. So that puts it on the defense to then make an offer. And realistically, in this case, given the facts, there really wasn't going to be anything that these individuals would have been able to negotiate for that would make sense to them and make sense to the prosecution. So in that situation where you have the DA and the defense can't come to an agreement, those are the cases that basically have to go to trial. So Boatright, Williams, and Newsome decided to take their cases to trial. So Robert Allen, having reached a deal with the DA, decided that he was going to testify against his boys. So he gave the play-by-play on the stand in terms of what happened, and the defense did what normally you would expect from the defense attorneys, basically trying to smear his name, attack his credibility, allude to the idea that, he would just say anything the prosecution wants him to say in order to ultimately build their case. And I've talked about this before on this channel that if you are facing a criminal charge and you have somebody who has decided to cooperate with the government, you would better watch out because, you're just in for a long road when it comes to snitches testifying against you because, they tend to have a very high success rate. And why? That's because they were right alongside with you, right? They were right alongside with you doing the dirt. And so their testimony tends to be highly believable, even if they're not the best characters, right? They may not be the most otherwise credible people, right? They have a long string of offenses on their criminal history. Sometimes, not all the time, but they may have drug offenses, violent offenses, theft offenses on their rap sheet. But when they go and take the stand and say, hey, yeah, on this date, we went and we did this, we did that, and then we did this, and this is what happened, that's really difficult to combat because, at the same time, generally speaking, the prosecutor is not going to put that person on the stand unless what they're saying checks out and basically goes along with the rest of the evidence that they have in their file, right? So prosecutors tend to not want to look foolish when they're presenting their evidence. So if they put on a snitch and he says X, Y, and Z, and that doesn't line up with the rest of the evidence, then that's just going to look bad for them. So part of their deal with the snitch is going to be, hey, you have to tell the truth when you get on the stand, because if you lie, then all bets are off. The deal is off the table. The snitch then has a high incentive to tell the truth, right? Because they want to hold on to that deal. Ultimately, Boatright, Williams, and Newsome, they were found guilty of first-degree murder and robbery with an armed weapon. And every one of them received 2 life sentences each. So going back to the topic of snitch testimony, when they reach an agreement with the district attorney to cooperate, the DA doesn't say, okay, well, if you testify for us, we're going to give you 2 years, or we're going to give you 5 years, or you won't have to do any further time. The DA doesn't lock themselves into the amount of time. What they say is that, hey, we will work with you based on your cooperation with us. So it ends up being very open-ended. They will make a recommendation to the judge for a sentence that ultimately reflects how they valued that testimony. And in this particular case, both the prosecutor and the defense were asking that he serve no further time in custody, right? So he had already been in custody for 5 years. This case had been lasting for a while. He'd already served 5 years, and the DA and the defense were saying, hey, he doesn't need to do any further time. And so this just goes to show how valuable that testimony was to the prosecution, because they didn't have to ask for no time. They could have said, hey, in addition to the 5 years he's already done, we want him to do another 4 years or 5 years or however much. But they said, hey, no further time is necessary. And obviously the defense was trying to ask for the same thing. He's already done 5 years. He gave this information. There's no additional time needed. One of the other major issues in this particular case was or is the fact that Robert Allen's life is at risk. I don't know about Robert Allen, but I know the other 3 co-defendants were apparently affiliated with a local gang. And so as a result of him testifying against them and cooperating with them, that puts his life at risk. And not only that, there was another case that Robert Allen had apparently given information on that led to a finding of probable cause to reopen a cold case that had, was unrelated to the XXXTentacion case. That's all the more incentive for there to be a target on this man's back. And so the DA actually at the sentencing had numerous county sheriffs, detectives, and a member of the gang task force testify that, hey, Robert Allen's life is at risk if he has to go to prison based on him cooperating. And so, this was essentially a plea for Robert Allen's life. And this is the way his defense attorney was looking at it. Hey, if you make him go to prison, if he has to go to prison, then this is essentially a death sentence for him because of the target that's going to be on his back. And so the judge took both sides into consideration and ultimately sentenced Robert Allen to 7 years. So he's already done 5 years. He'll have 2 more years that he'll have to serve in the state prison. And then once he gets out, he'll then have 20 years of probation that he'll be serving. So he'll have to basically be an angel for 20 years, a good portion of the rest of his life. And, once you make it 20 years, you're pretty much past the point where people are getting into gang activity or committing offenses that are going to land you in this type of situation again. So Robert Allen ultimately gets sentenced to the 7 years. He's already done 5. He has 2 years left. Hopefully he's kept safe. Again, he's got that big target on his back for having cooperated with the government against his co-defendants and that other individual, all of whom are allegedly part of the same gang. Certainly don't want to see any more senseless violence than has already happened. But that's it for this video. So if you got something out of it, please show me some love and hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notifications so you never miss a new video when it drops. As always, I want to thank you so much for watching, and until next time, peace.